So the aim of this session is we're going to look at the differences between stress, worry, and anxiety, and how unsettling times can lead to an anxious state. So the purpose of this is by understanding how this can occur, you should be able to identify early on whether your worries are starting to affect you and hopefully prevent them from having more serious physical and emotional effects. We're also going to discuss some practical tips that you can hopefully take away as well to effectively manage your stress and worries through this period of uncertainty, but also through future periods as well, because this isn't going to be the first time that we are experiencing this kind of uncertainty. So first of all, we're going to look at stress versus anxiety. Both words are quite often thrown about a lot nowadays, but they are actually quite different. So generally, stress is a reaction to an external cause, which normally subsides once the situation is over. A good example might be stepping out into the road and then realizing that a car's coming. So it's a natural response that has evolved to save your life. So you'll all be familiar with the fight, flight, or freeze response. This is your body's reaction to a perceived threat. So your heart rate increases, your pupils dilate, your stomach and muscles constrict, you might get a dry mouth. Generally, your body can recover pretty quickly following a stress response. And it's got many positive effects, such as for adaptation and building resilience. So in other words, if we encounter that situation again, we'll be more prepared and therefore our response won't be as intense. But exposing your body to long-term stress can also cause some real issues for both our mental and physical health, which is probably something that isn't new to you all. But imagine your body is in a constant state of fight or flight, and just think of the kind of pressure that this puts on your body's resources. So if it's ignored, chronic stress can lead to heart conditions, problems with digestion, weight gain and diabetes, trouble sleeping, and other mental health conditions such as anxiety and depression.
Yeah, I usually sort of liken it so people understand it to what happens when you really rev up the engine. So if you're in a situation in traffic where you need to get out of a jam, or somebody's doing the wrong thing and you need to really quickly get out, then it's perfectly reasonable to sort of step down on the accelerator and get out of that situation very quickly. And of course, the engine revs up and you're free and no harm is done. Your car doesn't suffer for it or anything else. But imagine that you're in that, that you've got your car and it's parked in front of your house, and you're just in it and you're just pressing down on that accelerator all the time without going anywhere. That's kind of equivalent to what's happening here, because that fight or flight or freeze response is getting triggered by almost anything, and most of that response, which is evolved to save our lives, involves us getting away from something or hiding or doing something like that in the moment. Whereas the types of things that we get anxious about don't call for that kind of action. So we're not really running away or doing anything like that. So we're in that revved up state without it going anywhere. So if you do that to a car, you can imagine the damage that you're going to do to the engine. So it's kind of a similar situation. It's a good metaphor to understand what goes on when you're in that state.
Yeah, that is really good actually, and it leads on to my next slide as well, which is about modern stress. So in modern times, the stress response is generally caused by our own perceptions to situations that we encounter. And it's also expanded to things which aren't an immediate danger or life-threatening, such as being late for a meeting or worrying about how we look. It's also a response to the situations that we imagine might happen and therefore worry about, such as losing our jobs. We often worry about things that are unlikely to happen and that are mostly outside of our control, such as the COVID-19 outbreak. In these circumstances, our response to stress is not adaptive. It's normal to feel worried or stressed at times, I should say. We all feel it on a day-to-day basis sometimes. And our response to a stressful situation is largely determined by how familiar we are with it and how prepared we feel to deal with it. COVID-19 is quite a good example of this. I think for many of us, this is something that we've not had to deal with before. I certainly haven't. And it's something that's outside of our control. So when we don't know what the outcome of the situation will be, it can create this feeling of unsettled You just feel unsettled. So as a result, we can experience more worries associated with that situation, and more worries, if not dealt with correctly, can lead to anxiety. So now we'll look at anxiety. In very simple terms, anxiety can be defined as excessive and uncontrollable worry, and is usually accompanied by physical symptoms such as shaking, having a fast heart rate, feeling like you can't breathe, or choking, having a choking sensation around your neck. Sometimes it's accompanied by headaches, dizziness, a churning feeling in your stomach, pins and needles, faster breathing, among other changes. These can become severe enough to qualify as a panic attack. So our response to a situation, especially a stressful one, relies on a number of different factors, including our social environment, our biology, and most importantly, our psychology. So if we think about stress at one end of the continuum as a very natural response, and anxiety at the other as a disorder, we're now going to explore the link, which is worrying. So worry is a thought process where we become concerned about future events, assume negative outcomes, and experience uncertainty, which I think most of us can probably relate to right now. It's usually accompanied by a sense of dread or anxiety, which can last for minutes or hours. And worry leads us to being preoccupied, which can have a negative effect on both our productivity and mood. And this is going to be quite relevant for us now, because for most of you, you're going to be working at home during this crisis where we've got a period of uncertainty. So it's important to realize how worries can impact you and how to manage it better. At this point, I should say that worry is a very natural human reaction. Some stats for you: about 86% of adults consider themselves to be worriers. I'm probably one of them. And 5% have generalized anxiety disorder, or GAD for short. And GAD is characterized by long-term excessive or controllable worry and physical symptoms which have been present for at least 6 months.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's important to know that GAD, generalized anxiety disorder, is not the only anxiety disorder. So they all have similar characteristics in which you have that stress response that we were talking about previously. Some of them are, so generalized anxiety disorder is characterized with this free-floating anxiety. So it's not particularly attached to any particular situation. It's just there almost all the time. And it doesn't tend to come punctuated with any of the panic attacks that we were mentioning in the past slide. So there's other kinds of anxiety disorder that are much more concrete and much more specific about a given situation, or they can be triggered by specific things in the environment or stimuli. So an example of that might be agoraphobia, for example, or panic disorder is another example. So altogether, all anxiety disorders tend to affect around about 15% of the population altogether. But they're all characterized by this excessive, the characteristics are very similar. So the generalized anxiety disorder, the main difference is that it's just this free-floating anxiety that doesn't tend to get attached to anything specifically. It just attaches to the next thing that happens to pop into your head.
Exactly, brilliant. So a worry can be real or hypothetical. And generally, if you think about when you do worry about things, it usually starts with a what if and spirals quickly from there. So for example, what if I lose my job? Or what if I can't pay my rent? Or what if I get sick and can't work? And these kind of questions can often lead us to imagine the worst case scenario, which can just intensify our worries even further. It can impact us physically, emotionally, and behaviorally. So how we respond to worry can maintain it. So building awareness around this is the first step to actually changing it. So at this point, hopefully you should feel confident in understanding the differences between stress, anxiety, and worry. So now we get to the good bit, which is how to actually manage our worries and prevent them from causing anxiety or other health conditions. If we take the current COVID-19 as an example, the fundamental point here is that we don't know what the outcome will be, and we have very little control over it. What we can control, however, is the way that we respond to the situation. So we're going to look at some practical ways that you can limit your worry during this time, but these tips can also be applied to other situations which might be causing you significant worry, whether it's out in the public eye, or whether it's personal to you. So first of all would be limit your exposure to the news. Try and pick one or two reputable sources. For example, the BBC or the World Health Organization during this time are probably two very good and reliable resources that you can stay up to date with the current situation. But try and limit yourself to receiving news to perhaps once a day, maybe first thing in the morning or towards the end of the day. If you overexpose yourself to news, this can just heighten your level of worry and panic during an unsettling time. So it's really important that you are quite strict with yourself and limit your news exposure. The next point is social media. So, social media generally day to day is absolutely fine. And certainly during this time, it's great for staying connected with people especially during kind of social distancing and isolation. And it can also provide some light-hearted humor. So for anyone that goes on Instagram, there are memes flying around about the COVID-19, and they are quite funny. But remember that social media, especially for sources of information, is probably not the best place to be looking. A lot of it can be rife with negativity and false information. So try and limit yourself to maybe checking social media once or twice a day. And outside of a crisis, this is quite a normal recommendation as well. Keep your screen time to maybe 30 minutes at a time, a couple of times a day.
One point that I'd like to make before you carry on, Emily, is that I tend to see lots of things circulating that seem to come from reputable sources. Maybe it is like a doctor speaking or something like that, and gives a series of recommendations, and they tend to be all wrong, or not all wrong. Even more worryingly, some of it is kind of right or based on something real, and then there's a lot of misinformation or a lot of things that could be potentially harmful. But because they are phrased in a particular way, people tend to believe them. I mean, I thought the last one was about somebody who was talking about the results of autopsies in China, things like that. They tend to not, I mean, they're not credible. So you need to sort of make sure that you understand the sources of all this information, and actually just be very skeptical of any of those. And unless it comes from the World Health Organization or the NHS, completely disregard whatever you get on social media. I think that's very important.
Yeah, I agree, because there will be some instances where there will be a marketing ploy behind it, for example. So yeah, that's a really good point. The next thing is to stay connected. Try and stay connected to people using video chats like FaceTime, Skype, Zoom, and so on, especially where work is concerned. It's going to be really, really easy for people to slip into the habit of emailing, messaging, or calling. So try and make an effort to hold as many of your meetings or team catch-ups over video. You can also get quite creative here. I don't know if anyone's seen on LinkedIn, or there's loads of pictures going around of teams holding kind of virtual cafes or having lunch breaks with your friends, teams and families. I know for me, it's one of our friends' birthdays at the weekend, and we were going to do a party for her, and now obviously we can't. So we are going to set up a Zoom call, and we're all coming in a nice and fancy dress and having our kind of party like that. And yes, it's not the same, but it is. We're so lucky that we have digital technology now to stay connected to people. So especially during periods of social distancing, it's going to be really important to increase the amount that you feel you're connected to people. The next point is about self-care. So try and be strict about giving yourself time to do things you enjoy every day. And that could be reading, exercising, taking a bath, or even cooking. Most of you will probably have saved time on commuting by being forced to work from home. So try and use that time creatively and don't use it to work. You might even want to set yourself some goals to work towards. So for me personally, I've always been someone that exercises at the gym, and I don't enjoy doing it at home or outside, but I have no choice now. So I'm going to use that one slot a day to go out and exercise, and I've set myself a goal of being able to run for 30 minutes without stopping by the end of May. It's not a huge goal, it's manageable, and I think that's what the key is. But having small achievable goals can be a way of keeping yourself entertained and engaged during this period of time. The next part is, I'm sure you all know, stay active and eat well. Most gyms or online PTs, I think, are posting videos and home workouts. So you can access lots of resources online or YouTube. You can even just go for a walk or a run, especially if you live somewhere that's close to a park or countryside. Before you do, make sure that you always are checking the current government guidelines and making sure that they're allowing it. Obviously, following last night's update, it's going out once a day. So just keep up to date with that. The next slide I want to slightly touch on is financial well-being. A lot of us may be less worried about the kind of social distancing aspect of this current situation and more about our finances. Financial well-being is something that is very much a relevant topic in today's society outside of the COVID-19 outbreak. We know that financial well-being is quite a stressor for many people. So again, try and stay informed from reputable sources. The link here at the bottom is the direct link to the government's coronavirus website, which gives all of the latest updates and also talks about the kind of financial support that they're going to be offering. If you are worried about how your job will be impacted during this time, just make sure you try and speak to your line manager before allowing yourself to get too worried about it. Most businesses are hopefully being offered some kind of relief, and the government are obviously putting in place measures and communicating quite a lot about how this is going to impact people. So just try not to let news of other people's situations impact how you feel about your own, and just stay communicating with your line manager or your employer if you are concerned for your own financial well-being. The next point I want to slightly touch on is health anxiety. So there will also be some of you who may feel worried about getting the virus yourself, especially if you've got an underlying health condition or are pregnant or have elderly relatives. Again, this is perfectly normal. However, we do want to make you aware that if you do feel significantly worried about this, if you don't effectively deal with those worries, it could be a sign of health anxiety. We're not going to go into too much detail about what this is today, because Andreas is going to be running a more in-depth session on health anxiety this Wednesday at 10 a.m. Andreas, I don't know whether you want to say what it will be covering.
Yeah, so if anybody is interested, so health anxiety is kind of like a label that is given to two different conditions that are recognized. And what I want to do is just make people aware of them and how they work, and particularly the type of negative thinking that can come with them, just to be able to detect it, and what are the best ways to sort of deal with that negative thinking. The point is that, you know, you want to be proportional, and you want to not let the anxiety take over your life, so that you are basically completely unable to function because of that kind of a worry. So it's just going through what it is, how it works, and what are the best ways to deal with it.
Brilliant. So for anyone that wants to sign up for that, you can just use the same Eventbrite link that's been shared with you, and it's now on there to register. So now we're going to give you some practical tips for managing everyday worries. Most of us are pretty good at compartmentalizing our worries day to day, but in a global crisis or period of uncertainty, our worries can be heightened. So it can be difficult to shut them off. So it's good to know what you can do to manage this. So we've got a few little tips and exercises that you can try if you do feel that you want to try and manage these better. First one is worry time. So sometimes worry can feel hard to control. So rather than trying to stop it or ignore it altogether, one technique is to schedule worry time, where you can dedicate time to think about your worries. So this means giving yourself permission to put off thinking about any worries until later in the day. So anytime a worry comes to mind, take a minute, write it down, just one or two words about it, perhaps on your phone or a piece of paper. Just write down the topic of your worry, not any specific details. So it might be money. Then think about where and when and how you're going to deal with your worry list. During the day, when new worries come up, just simply add them to your list. Try and schedule a time where you'll be able to have your worry time undisturbed, and choose a place that you don't spend a lot of time relaxing. for example, the kitchen. So the idea here is to avoid worry becoming linked to a place of relaxation or sleep. Because if you do it, if you are scheduling it too close to when you're going to sleep, it might then keep you up and impact your quality of sleep. And try and limit it to no more than 30 minutes. Once you've planned the time and place for your worry time, you can let go of your worries for now, as you know that you will deal with them later at a specific time. You can then refocus your attention on what you're doing presently and distract yourself from feeling worried. Then when your dedicated worry time arrives, set a timer for 30 minutes, take out your list of worries and work your way through them one by one. The point is to allow yourself to think about everything you're worried about. And if you come across a worry that's no longer relevant, for example, it was an in the moment and now you've come back to it, it's not bothering you anymore, just cross it off your list. As you do this, you sort them into things that you can do something about and things that you can't. Those that you can do something about, either make a brief plan to deal with them or schedule some time in the future when you can deal with them effectively. When the 30 minutes are done, your worry time ends. So that's when you let go of that and you focus back on the present. Try and repeat this process every time a new worry comes up. And look, whilst this exercise doesn't necessarily solve your worries, what it does is it does limit the amount of time you spend thinking about them, meaning that they don't overwhelm you.
Yeah, so there's good evidence that that sort of thing does work very well to reduce the anxiety. So that's sort of a technique. It does require practice and getting used to it, but is a very good advice. It's actually part of what CBT is, what cognitive behavioral therapy is a technique that comes from that. It's a medium, not an advanced technique, but it's a medium level technique. But it's actually quite easy to use and quite easy to master. The other thing that we have evidence for is that this technique that Emily just explained, if you do it, you cannot do it too close to sleep, but if you do it, when you are doing your prep for sleep, perhaps an hour to maybe a couple of hours before you get to bed, we know that people sleep better when they've done this and they've scheduled their worry time, they've made notes of all the things that are in their head, and then they know they're either going to solve them at a particular time, they're going to do something about a particular time, or that they dealt with them right then and there. So it's actually pretty useful.
Yeah, I know for me, if I've got loads of things going on in my head, I struggle to fall asleep and it can be quite hard to tune it out. So I've actually started doing this. And if I feel like I'm really busy or that I've got loads of things I need to do tomorrow, I just quickly write down a list of what I'm concerned about or what I need to do, and then put that list away, and then at least I know that it's there and I'm not going to forget about it and I can come back to it. So that can help. The next part is to ask yourself, then what? So if you recall back when we were talking about what a worry is, often worries are hypothetical. So what if? What if I don't get the promotion? What if I lose my job? What if I get ill and can't work? It's really common to get stuck at the worst part of the scenario without thinking about what would happen next or what we would do about it. So I'll use the feedback to go for the next promotion, or I'll look for another job, or I'll go to the doctors and speak to my line manager. By facing the worry in this way, by asking yourself, then what? So what would I do and how would I cope, can take some of the heat off it. When we work through our worries in this way, we often realize that we could probably cope better than we initially expected. So this can be really helpful.
And again, this comes from this cognitive behavioral therapy skills set. So, I mean, I'll say one thing first. I noticed that there's a few questions about these, and they are actually quite interesting questions. So what I'm thinking is we will deal with them in the Q&A section. So I haven't answered them directly now, but I will address them because I think they're very interesting. So just to carry on with my point about the then what solution. So sometimes we are catastrophizing, and this is a simple way of dealing with that. But if you want the more advanced technique that requires practice, it's not going to work immediately. It does require, it's a skill that you acquire over time, like almost like any skill. it will be quite helpful. Is allowing you to sort of see the difference between helpful and unhelpful thoughts. So helpful thoughts are thoughts that may help you find a solution or work your way around it or cope with it better or adapt to the situation or, do something that is that enables you to function better or do better or cope better. Unhelpful thoughts just keep you stuck and you keep ruminating over them, but they get you nowhere. And there's a way to tell them apart and there's a way to deal with them. And again, in the app, we have the CBT program and it very much addresses these points directly. So it's worth checking out. As I said, it's a skill that you have to get with time and it requires some practice.
Brilliant. This third point is to stay present. So sometimes we can get stuck worrying about things in the past or future. For a lot of us, it's probably thinking about the uncertainty of, how long is this going to go on for? What's going to happen? And all of these things that we can't control and we don't know the answers to. And it takes away from what we're doing in the present day. So the practice of mindfulness, which I'm sure you've all heard plenty of times, it's very popular now, is really about learning how attention gets captured by thoughts, particularly worries, and learning how to notice how this process happens, and then learning that you don't need to engage with these thoughts if you don't want to. So you're then achieving more conscious attention control. So our app, the Thrive app, hopefully most of you have got it or accessed it, has a variety of techniques that you can try, which all have years of research behind them. Calm breathing, progressive deep muscle relaxation, and the applied relaxation really focus on the mind and body connection, which can be a really great place to start. There's a very clear mind-body connection in worrying. So sometimes if we can't control our mind, it's easier to gain control of these kind of sensations in the body and control the mind that way in turn. We also offer various versions of concentration meditation and 2 sessions more focused on mindfulness. Self-suggestion is more about making a strong link between a state of relaxation and a thought or image so that you can bring about the relaxation state quickly by bringing the linked thought or image to mind. Again, all of these require practice, but I think now we've got a fair bit of time on our hands. It's very much worth all of our while to be practicing these, and we kind of don't really have an excuse now. So hopefully you can, if you haven't had a chance to get on the app, you can download it after today's session and have a play around with some of these sessions. Yeah,
I mean, if you go on it, the way it's structured is it teaches you some of those CBT skills that we were talking about, the cognitive behavioral therapy skills. I mean, it's got the name therapy in it, but the skills that you gain are applicable to everyone and they are useful. And as I said, they can be used with everyday worries to try and control them better, etc. So worthwhile. And also they go through all of these techniques and basically put them in context within the larger picture of managing your thoughts, the emotions, controlling those helpful and unhelpful thoughts and the behavior around them and your body reactions and how they affect your body. So this is a very good time to start practicing that skill and getting it. It's a lifelong skill that will be useful to everyone to gain, and particularly useful at this point in time, I believe.
Yeah, definitely. Okay, so we've come to the end of the session. So I just wanted to summarize what we've kind of covered today. So stress is a response to a perceived threat in our external environment. Anxiety is caused by how we respond to those perceived stressors. Worry, we've also talked about, is a natural human reaction, but too much of it can lead to anxiety and other health conditions. Our worries are real or hypothetical and usually start with a what if. A big contributor to that is our past experiences. So the more we've done something, the less worried we'll feel about it or less stressed we'll feel. Our social environment, so the kind of support we have, and our psychology, so the way that we actually think about things, are all key drivers in the way we respond to stress. If you do find that worries are becoming unmanageable or you find yourself worrying quite a bit, then it might be good to dedicate some worry time each day to try and work through those worries. And when you get worried, think, then what? And finally, practice ways of trying to stay in the present. And then a final just extra tip is to learn to control attention better instead of it being captured by worry by default without you even noticing. So again, those sessions within our app will help you to do that, hopefully. So this is just a page to show you how to download the app. Everyone on this webinar should have their own access code, which if you don't know what it is, just get in touch with your company and they will share the access code with you. Really simple to download. So we will have some time for Q&A now. I can see we've got a few. Andreas,
yeah, we've got a few questions that I've been saving up. So I think we'll just work our way through it. I think the first one, Lorraine is asking whether there's a proven link between stress or anxiety and physical illness. And the answer is, I think Emily made a point about this at the beginning, very much so. There's a very clear link. Mind and body are deeply connected. And when you do suffer from stress and anxiety, depression as well, you can have increase your risk of developing a physical illness. It does affect things like your risk of developing obesity, diabetes, type 2 in particular, things like cardiovascular disease, having high blood pressure, and other conditions, because it also tends to affect sleep, and sleep is connected to basically all health. Then there's another link there. Also, I forgot to mention the immune system is particularly susceptible to being in a heightened stressed state. So yes, there is a very clear, well-proven, well-established link between anxiety, stress, and physical health conditions.
Yeah.
I don't know if you want to take the next one, Emily.
The next one is scheduling worry time a realistic solution given the nature of worry and how it impacts us physically and mentally in real time. So I think the point here, and Andreas obviously expand or correct me here, is if something is impacting you physically, then that is your response to stress. If you are finding yourself worrying, this is something that is going to take practice. So worry time is not something that is natural to us, but if you do it and schedule some time either in the start of your day or throughout the day and practice it, it will become easier. I don't know, I mean, Andreas, do you find, as a psychiatrist,
it's a regular, absolutely. Yeah, it's a regular question that I get asked, is this a realistic thing? Basically, it requires a little bit of the self-discipline, but it can be. Obviously, not everybody's able to do this. Not everybody's, successful at dealing with this. But many people are. A lot of people that initially are very skeptical about it and give it a try, make sure that they are doing it. They actually do make progress, and they report lower levels of anxiety as a result. So it does vary from individual to individual, but it's worthwhile doing. And what happens is when you do get a real-time impact, and you've practiced this, to think immediately, okay, this is not the time to deal with this. I have my worry time for this. And whereas at the beginning it's hard, the more you do it, the better you get at it.
Yeah, I think it's that whole point about conscious versus conscious learning, isn't it? So when you first start doing something like that, it can feel a bit uncomfortable because you're not used to it. But the more you do it, the more automatic it becomes, and then it will get to a point where you don't think about it, and it's an automatic response to just put those worries down, put them away, and then come back to them later. And obviously, there are going to be times where worry or anxiety does affect you, and you might need to seek further support as well. So it's not to say that you just do this and that's it, and it's going to solve everything. So there may be times where you do have to reach out for support, whether that be through your family networks or through external professional support services.
Absolutely, that's
as well.
a very good point. Yes, absolutely. Yes.
Yeah. So the next one from Becky, would you recommend doing the exercises on the app just once a day?
Yeah, I mean, you can do them. You can do them as regularly as you like. So yes, it's once a day. It's recommended. So what we see on average in the app is most people will use it about once a day, and for about 10 to 15 minutes, they will do maybe one or two of the sessions, and that's been linked to good results. So it's a matter of learning these techniques and practicing them regularly. It is a bit, some people find it like they have to motivate themselves to engage, but it's well worth the results. And it's only about, for it to be effective, all you need to do is to dedicate about 10 minutes or so per day. That should be plenty. If you not able to dedicate 10 minutes to it, but it is still effective if you use it less frequently. So the fact that you cannot do it every day doesn't mean that you should give up on it. You still can learn the skills, even if it's at a slower pace, and it's still worth your while doing it, even if it's less frequently than once a day.
I know for me, personally, I use the deep muscle relaxation session if I am particularly busy in the head, because it does keep me up sometimes, especially if I'm really busy at work or I've got lots of things that I'm thinking about. And I'm not someone that meditates very easily. So for me, the deep muscle works really well. And I will do that, when I feel like I'm particularly busy and that I might struggle to get to sleep. So that can be really good. So it doesn't necessarily, like Andrea said, have to be on a day-to-day basis, but a lot of people do like incorporating it in. So it's really about what works for you.
Absolutely, yes. So I think our next question is about a specific individual has a concern, shivers and a dry mouth. We know the symptoms. We can't really address a specific complaint from a specific individual. It's really very hard to tell. So if this has been going on for any amount of time, I think it makes perfect sense to go and seek help, get a specific consultation, and talk to a healthcare professional that can help you determine whether this is anxiety, but it could be something else. It could be very many things actually with just those two symptoms. It could be nothing at all as well. So it does require a one-to-one discussion with a healthcare professional.
Yeah, brilliant. Next one is, you often hear comments such as born warrior or a stressy person. Is there always an underlying reason, or can it just be part of someone's character? I think that, yes, there are definitely characteristics of people. So if you think back to, we said that contributing factors are our biology, our social environment, our experiences, and our personality. So there are biological underpinnings behind our stress response and the way that we think about things. Also, people's natural tendencies. You might be more inclined to overthink or get worried about things. But the best part about it is that biology only makes up no more than 50% of our kind of predisposed behaviors, and our psychology is by far the most dominant, and the psychology is the part that we can change. So by going through, for example, the CBT program, or practicing the relaxation sessions or various mindfulness techniques, that's how you train your brain. And our brain, I'm sure you've all heard of the word neuroplasticity. As we get older, it's not as able to change as quickly as when we're children, but we do have the ability to rewire our brains in a way. So that's why these kind of techniques can work. So to answer your question, yes, there are sometimes underlying reasons and be part of someone's character, but it's not as clear cut as that. And it can be changed as well. That's the important
takeaway message, is that yes, you may have a predisposition to these conditions, but there's definitely benefit to be had from learning these techniques and practicing them. Absolutely. And so Emily was saying that as we get older, perhaps we have less neuroplasticity, but actually most people retain quite a lot of neuroplasticity until, throughout their lifetime. So, older people are very well able to learn these techniques and benefit from them just as much as younger people can. So it's definitely worth doing.
Okay, perfect. We've got a question which I've just answered, that is So we've got next one. I'm finding it hard to concentrate on work, especially at home when I'm not only worried, but also distracted by things in the house. I've always preferred going to the office. Have you got any suggestions?
Well, that's a hard one. I think we're all struggling with that one, aren't we?
Yeah.
I don't know if you have any advice, Emily?
Yeah, I mean, I'm just telling my mum to stay out of my room. No, I think it's going to be a period of adjustment this time. I know I'm definitely someone that is much more productive in the office, but we don't have a choice. So it's about making realistic adaptations. So if you can, make a space that is just for your work. So try and do it in an area that you're not necessarily going to be disturbed, and try and set it up nicely as well. So don't have loads of stuff cluttering your desk or your workspace. You might want to, put a plant there or candles, or just make it a nice space for you. Obviously there's going to be distractions, and that's fine. I think if you're on a call or in a meeting where you need to be away from distractions, then you may have to go up into your room or somewhere that you're less likely to be disturbed. But also try and give yourself maybe regular breaks. If you're finding it hard to concentrate, the more you try and keep focusing on what you're doing, the harder it can be, because you then start to become frustrated about the fact that you can't concentrate. So it might just be helpful to set yourself regular breaks, and if you do feel yourself lagging, then just get up, move away from your desk, go, or from wherever you're working, have a cup of tea, a coffee, a drink, whatever it might be, go and sit on the sofa. Just take yourself away from that situation, even if it's just for 10-15 minutes. And maybe also try some of the tips that we've talked about today, like the worry time. If you are feeling like you're worried, have a go at that. And as we said, it's going to require practice, but that might be something that helps you.
Yeah, I mean, one thing that I will say, so for example, I don't struggle to work at home at all, but my wife very much does. She's kind of like our anonymous person that is asking the question here. So what she needs is, she needs a lot of quiet. So she has special ear, she's got this noise cancelling earphones that basically isolate her completely from anybody else. And she's found a quiet corner, and basically none of us is allowed there or anywhere near. And that's how she does it. She's made that nice space. She makes sure that all her stuff is available, so she doesn't need to go around the house and get distracted by whatever else that everybody else is doing. So that's kind of worked for her. But is that noise cancelling earphones that she really finds helpful? I don't know if that's...
Do you know what brand they are, Andreas? We just had a question.
I have no idea. I shouldn't plug anything like that.
You're not sure. I'm sure if you Google some good noise cancelling headphones, there'll be plenty out there.
Yeah, they really work for her. Yeah, and she doesn't even have music on them. She just uses them to drone us all out.
Okay, brilliant. Okay, so next one is found to thrive through charity work with brothers and nuns. Joined this session more to understand identifying anxiety better, as I know it's an underlying issue which doesn't always shine through on the surface. Can I just ask, how do you feel generally is best to have an open question with people about their anxiety? Andreas, do you want to answer that one?
Okay, yes. How is best to have an open question with somebody about their anxiety? I mean, this is the reason I hesitate is because it's a kind of like a session on their own, and we do this. We have a whole session that goes through how to look out for the particular signs that people might be manifesting, so you can help them out, and also how to set out and have that particular conversation. So actually, that reminds me, we haven't run that one for a while, and it might be that we just need to do it. I'm sorry I cannot really run it answer it in like a pithy little 3 sentences, because it is actually a longer discussion. But yeah, I think what we'll do, Emily, if that's okay, we'll set up one that you know, that enables people sort of go and learn about that, about how to ask those questions and how to notice those signs and symptoms and how to
absolutely.
set it all out. Yeah.
And I think it also, just generally speaking, it depends on how well you know the person as well. If there's someone close with you in your network, I think a lot of us can sort of overthink how we're going to approach it. When really, if you have a relationship with that person or you know them, it's just a case of opening up a conversation and asking how they feel. Is what I would say, sort of personally. But I think there are obviously, there's a lot more depth that we can go into, especially if it's regarding someone that maybe you don't know or you want to build your confidence in actually approaching that conversation. Then yeah, if that's going to be a helpful session, we will definitely run one of those over the coming weeks.
Yeah, no, that's a very good point. So, I mean, one thing that I would say is actually, Emily's absolutely right in that if you show that you care and you ask somebody, that is almost always, or always, I would say, helpful.
Yeah.
So therefore, don't hesitate, particularly if it's somebody in your network, somebody that you know, even if you are not sure how to have that conversation, just to show that concern, say, look, you know, I've noticed that you seem to be a little bit more downcast or worrying or something. That's going to be helpful in itself, and it will open up that discussion. Nobody's going to receive that badly. So it's worth approaching somebody if you have any idea or any thought or anything passes your mind that they might be struggling. Yes, we can go in a lot more depth, but that's important to bear in mind. Yeah.
So the next question is there something like a resource that I can refer back to help identify the difference between a worry which needs to be dealt with in worry time and just a realistic concern? From my perspective here, I think just again, worrying is completely normal, so that's fine. I think the time when it might be a concern is if it's ruminating and if you're finding yourself unable to not think about that worry, or whether you're finding that it's impacting your ability to concentrate on things that you're doing at that particular time. For example, if you're trying to get something done with work, but constantly in your head, you're thinking about, you know, am I going to be able to continue working, or am I going to be laid off, or whatever it might be. It's not necessarily the context of the worry, it's about how it's actually impacting you, and if it's getting to a stage where it is actually taking away from your productivity and your ability to do your day-to-day things, that's where it is a bit more of a concern. But if it's a fleeting concern, like we all have, you know, I've been thinking, God, how am I going to deal with not seeing my friends for the next 3 months? It pops into my head, but I don't ruminate on it, and it's not something that that bothers me throughout the day. So I don't feel like it's something that I need to actually schedule time to think about. I think it's only if there's an element of, I don't really know what I'll do, or it's making you feel sort of anxious and you're unable to switch off. Andreas, I don't know whether there's anything else you want to add to that.
Yeah, no, I mean, so the CBT program basically deals with that directly. So it goes through what is realistic, what is not, and how to evaluate those worrisome thoughts that pop into our head, and look for the evidence that they are a realistic concern, or, you know, or that they are perhaps catastrophizing, or that they're exaggerated in some way, or not realistic in some particular way. So it goes through all that. So that's a good resource. The app itself, in the CBT program, it goes through that. I would say that Emily's right in that, you know, one of the things to watch out for is this distressing me? Is it causing me to suffer in any way? That's one question that perhaps will help. Another one is, am I getting any symptoms here that are, you know, any physical symptoms like we went through, like the palpitations or the chest, the feeling that you can't breathe or breathing too fast? You know, one of those symptoms. Am I getting those? And do I have any? Is it affecting my function? Those are like the three things to go through your mind. Is this just a fleeting worry, or is it a little bit something else? And if you have any doubt, of course, you need to sort of consult with a healthcare professional. Yes. So I think I think that summarizes it. Yeah.
Great. Next question is, how can you stop yourself getting in an argument with your worry, where your worry challenges your ability to be rational? Is this something worry time can help with, Andrea?
Yeah, no, I mean, it can. As I said, I think if you're really ruminating on things like that, it might be time to sort of look through the whole CBT program and use those techniques and see whether you can achieve that control. Basically, it is possible. It does require practice, and perhaps if it's something that is as pervasive as what you're talking about, it might require more advanced techniques than just setting up the worry time. Now, again, if you're getting any distress, any symptoms, or any is it affecting your function, those are things that may indicate that you might need to sort of seek extra help there.
Yeah. The next one is a more personal. I've been having panic attacks and a feeling of unease. So when I get the code for the app, what are the best options in the app?
I think we went through some of the physical relaxation techniques for the body and mind connection. Those might be very helpful to learn because they can be deployed during a panic attack. So again, we cannot answer specific situations for specific people, but I will say if you are in the general case of a panic attack for anybody, those are very useful techniques because they can be, once you learn them, you can use them very much in real time. And they can help you sort of even stop one of these before it actually happens. So the breathing technique is very handy for a panic attack because you can easily do it and you don't need to, sort of, nobody needs to notice that you're doing it. So it's, a lot of people report that is quite helpful in the onset of a panic attack. But also, for example, the applied relaxation technique where you're able to sort of, after a lot of practice, reduce the time where you are able to sort of get that relaxation response from about 50 minutes during the whole exercise, deep muscle relaxation exercise, to around a minute. Again, that can be a very helpful technique to know, to learn when you are prone to having panic attacks. And of course, the use of these. The last one is the self-suggestion, which we mentioned also earlier. Self-suggestion doesn't work for everybody. You need to have a very vivid imagination for it to work and being able to bring these images vividly to mind. But for those people that can do that kind of thing, it can be very useful. So you link a thought or an emotion, a thought or an image with that state of relaxation, and you can bring it to bear very quickly. So those are the three things that I would try in the general case of perhaps having had panic attacks and see if that would help. The whole applied relaxation program is appropriate, and of course the CBT program will help as well longer term.
Brilliant. We've got a couple of questions relating to sort of access codes and the materials for the webinar. So for anyone that doesn't know your access code, you should be able to get that from either someone within your HR team, or if you've got someone in a wellbeing team or benefits, for example, they are the ones that we typically deal with at the beginning of a partnership. So they should have that. Line managers might also know what the access code is as well. Most of the companies that we work with have various kind of supporting materials like flyers, download cards and things like that. So yeah, just get in touch with either, Oc Health or HR or your wellbeing team. If you have a wellbeing hub or like an intranet page, there might be some resources on there as well. Those are typically how people get access to them. And then regarding this session, we will be sharing a recording of this afterwards. So for everyone that signed up through the Eventbrite link, you will get an automated email within the next sort of 24 hours with a link to the recording for this session. It will be uploaded on YouTube. So stay tuned for that and you can access anything that you might have missed.
I think we in the interest of time, we'll take one more question, and that will be it. So somebody had already asked me a question before, which I promised we would talk about. Somebody said, if people follow these ideas, what would be the expected level of reduction in stress, worry, or anxiety? So I think that might be our closing question, if that's okay.
Yeah.
So yeah, so Emily, what do you think?
Sorry, can you, my signal just dropped out there, Andreas. Are you able to
Oh, did it?
repeat?
Okay, sorry.
Yeah, sorry, I don't know what
I'll
happened
start
there.
answering, and then you
Yeah.
can pick up as well. So yeah, so basically different people are different. So we know that a majority of people, if you have like if you have what we call a preclinical state, so you do have the worries and some of these things are there. Maybe you have mild symptoms, not quite severe enough to perhaps you know, when you go through a diagnostic interview with a healthcare professional, get a diagnosis, all of these techniques tend to be actually quite effective in that sort of situation. In mild situations, again, they tend to be quite effective as well, provided that you are committed to them and do the practice. They do tend to work in around 70% of individuals. They tend to work quite effectively. For moderate to severe presentations, that is more a terrain where you actually do need to work with a healthcare professional directly. And these techniques can be in support of all that, but it will not be a substitute for having direct contact and supervision from a healthcare professional. So again, all these will be mentioned, all these will be used, and they will be effective, but not on their own. You will need that extra support.
Brilliant. Okay. All right. Well, we're coming up to the end of the time now, so I'm sorry if we didn't get to answer all of the questions. If there is anything particularly ruminating that you would like us to try and answer, then feel free to either get in touch over the Eventbrite link. I think you can contact the organisers that way, or you can get in touch with your employer and they can forward on the questions. But I think we've tried to answer a range of questions as best we could, and there will be some other webinars coming up over the next couple of weeks. Again, if you access that Eventbrite link, they're constantly updated, so you might want to log on to those, and you can also ask questions there as well.
Thank you all very much.
So, yeah, so thanks everyone for joining today, and yeah, we hope this has been helpful. So I'm going to end the meeting now.